Hey, I'm in a very echoey room right now because I'm in the ref space, hackerspace, and I'm taking a look at these two power supplies. This is a genuine Lenovo. The sticker has been peeled off, and that's why it looks a bit gunky. And this is a replacement adapter with no real additional information. As you can see, the Lenovo has quite a lot of stuff on the back, all kinds of regulatory information and many things in different languages, I guess. This one is surprisingly sparse with the most important thing to note is that there are no independent certification things like UL or CSA, so going to be interesting. However, I did tear down a $4 Lenovo power supply, a while back. This one was actually
about 24 euros.
Okay, so that's Capacitor, that's the actual owner of these power supplies.
Yep, I own both. One of them is usually at home and the other one is usually in my backpack, so that's everywhere where I go.
So today we're going to look at the exact differences between the two. First difference, they are a very slightly different size, but the other differences are obviously inside. So let's crack them open.
I put both of them on a kitchen scale, and this one was about 150 grams, and this one was about 200 grams. So the cheaper one is also a bit lighter, but not that much.
Right, we've used the Dremel to slightly destructively cut open these cases. And
only slightly destructive because we're going to put them together.
Yeah, I mean, doing this with the Dremel, the nice thing is that you do end up with a reasonably neat edge that you can just tape over. It's not good as new, but it's just fine for daily use. Anyway, the immediate differences are that this one has full shielding, also on the component side, and this power supply, it does have apparently some shielding. Well, the idea was to just open them up and immediately show you how the two power supplies looked, but this shield this is the cheap power supply. It's actually glued into the case, and there are screws on that shield, so it's impossible to get it out without some severe weatherizing. So that's what we did. So the first thing you can see is that this is completely shielded and this is only partially shielded. However, on the cheapest power supplies you usually find no shielding at all, and the copper on the PCB usually does provide some effective shielding, although of course not for something like the MOSFET driver line. So this will not be something that's UL listable. Better than nothing, and I guess that's because that is why this is one of those in-betweener power supplies. It's not quite the cheapest, but it's also not quite on par with the good ones. So in order to look at the Lenovo power supply, we have to desolder these shields. So we'll just put this aside for now and have a quick look at this cheap power supply. It's nice that there's an actual PE sheet here. Some people have asked in the past, why do you need all these different layers of protection? Why can't they just, like on a power supply like this, why can't they just have components that are isolated and then have the shield right on top? And that is for a flammability rating. So they did kind of take into account that this might explode at some point, I guess. But just a very, very quick cursory look. They do have the protective earth wired nicely to the secondary ground, so that's a good thing. But then on the input, there's the input jack and what looks like a fusible resistor, or it's probably a real fuse. Not sure, I would have to take off the heat shrink, but I won't because this is going to be used again. And then there's the bridge rectifier and the bulk capacitor, main primary capacitor. So there's no filtering at all here on the primary, and again, that's not going to pass conducted emissions. So another thing that we found out while we were disassembling this is that there is a UL listing number here. It is E141940, and we took the liberty of looking it up. And that's a UL listing number for the PCB material. It's not actually for the power supply. It's just the PCB. So it's nice to know this is probably a genuine FR4, so fiberglass reinforced polycarbonate PCB. It's nice that it's not phenolic, but I'd rather the whole power supply be properly UL listed. Now also, it's pretty clear that we're dealing with a very simple, there's a single transistor here, transformer, and then an output diode. So this is almost definitely just a flyback converter. There is feedback, obviously you do need feedback for this kind of stuff. And there is probably a TL431, so this three-legged TO92 component here, that's probably the voltage reference. There is a capacitive coupling between primary and secondary, so that's nice. That means your secondary won't be floating at some undefined level and being a hazard for your insulation rating. And then on the output, again, there is no real filter. There's just two capacitors, which are Father branded, I think, or Gather branded. Definitely not a name brand, I would say. So yeah, that's basically it. There's not a lot. The primary capacitor, even though primary capacitors don't matter, TODA, Toda brand, I guess. So on the reverse side, one of the immediate things to see is that the solder quality overall is good. It's all wave soldered. However, these connections, so the output power connector, and also the input power connector and the ground connection, they're all clearly hand soldered and quite sloppily so. There's definitely no real quality control. There's only partial wetting here. This has a wrong color. I think this is also partially wetted. I feel a little divot in there. This seems properly wetted, but there's just some gunk in there. No real big issue. It's better than I've seen in other cheap power supplies. But the controller on this board is a KA3843. Apparently a Fairchild part, although I wouldn't vouch for the authenticity of this chip. Which is a general purpose PWM controller. So it's not even for something like quasi-resonant operation. It's just a straight up PWM controller in a flyback configuration. So it's not going to be very efficient. Other things we see quite interesting, I guess, is that there are these are the two connections for the primary capacitor. There are no real discharge resistors on here. No real high value resistors that I can see that discharge this capacitor, so this is going to be pretty dangerous if this had been turned on recently. On the secondary side, it's also quite clear there are only a couple of resistors and then the single active component and an optocoupler. So the only thing this is doing is voltage feedback. There is no overcurrent protection, there's no overcurrent trip circuit or anything. So this essentially has no protections. All right, we desoldered the shielding. Like with most of these things, people often say, well, if you buy something that's more expensive, it feels heavier, that's like a sign of quality. And I'm not quite sure if that's true, but with every step of the way, like this stupid shielding plastic that was between the actual assembly and the shield is significantly thicker plastic. It's also some kind of plastic that can at least withstand soldering temperatures for a short amount of time because it didn't melt when I removed the shield. And it's got these little tabs on there that makes assembly easier. So people just thought about this and used nice plastic. Same goes for the case itself. It's like significantly thicker plastic, and if you can see the mark here, it says PC, so that's polycarbonate, that is impact resistant plastic. Much nicer than, for instance, ABS. This is the cheap one, and that's doesn't even have a plastic mark, but that's definitely something like ABS or maybe even PE. It split very easily. It's relatively thin, for my taste at least. So enough about that. This is the actual assembly, and excuse me for all the gunk everywhere, but that's a feature. Of course, the gunk is in there to make sure that these kinds of adapters are thrown around, they're in people's bags, they get a lot of shock, so all the components need to be fixed in place. And also the gunk kind of helps with thermal dissipation as well, so that's a good thing. I'm not going to remove it because most of the things that we need to see are exposed, and I mean this has to work again for Capacitor. So, well, first of all, it's quite obvious, right? If you look at the input, there's a fuse. Already there is a little inductor. There's a differential cap. There is some kind of, I think this is TVS or MOV or something like that, because it's a disc-shaped component with heat shrink around it. So it's definitely designed to possibly explode and then not wreak havoc. And then there is a big common mode choke I can see under here. Maybe you can just see it. Then the bridge rectifier is here, and we've got a big, nice, and let me see. Yep, I can just about see a Nippon Chemicon icon there. So that's a high quality Japanese capacitor, 105C rated. So very nice all around. There is a single transistor here. The transformer is all gunked up, nothing to see there. An output rectifier, and that is a diode. So this does not have synchronous rectification. That's fine for this class of components. There is a CLC filter, and there I did see a little current shunt, or at least connections for it under here. So it's got overcurrent protection. And another way to see that it's got overcurrent protection is on the reverse side. And we have two optocouplers. So one is for the voltage feedback. Probably this is the voltage reference. And then the other one is for overcurrent feedback. This is just an on-off signal that shuts down this controller when probably this chip here, which is most likely just an op-amp, senses that the current is too high on the secondary side. Other things we can see, basically the only thing we can see on the reverse side is this controller. So the controller chip turned out to be an LTA 809. We tried to find a datasheet, but I know these chips exist, and I know there's this whole line of LTA 804, 806, 809. But no datasheets, so that's apparently something I might remember from other power supply teardowns, but no idea what it is. It is a flyback controller, although I couldn't say if it's a quasi-resonant one, so no real way to tell if this is a more efficient power supply than the other one. Yeah, and otherwise, that is pretty much it. So, as a conclusion, just a quick side-by-side comparison of the power supplies. You can see the Lenovo, genuine Lenovo, has a proper input filter circuit. The knockoff, I'm just going to call it knockoff, just has a fuse. I guess it's nice that it has a fuse, but no proper filter, so it's going to kick out a lot of EMI. The Lenovo has high quality components. It's got Nippon Chemicon primary and secondary caps. This one has a Toda input and a father, look, I'm your father, output caps, which meh. The output cap is also, just see this, it's right next to the screw of this output rectifier diode, which gets quite hot, so it's not the best placement in the world. This has overcurrent protection, while this has pretty much nothing of the sort, just has voltage feedback. In general, the genuine one, you know this, it is more expensive. You do get more value for money. This one will probably, I mean, the power quality is definitely lower and it will have a lower longevity, but I've just been informed that this one has actually run for quite a long time.
24/7 actually, most of the time not with a laptop connected, but still.
Yeah, so it's, I mean, it's not as bad as the $4 one, and clearly it can hold up for quite a couple of hours, and it's been charging and operating a laptop for quite a while, so you can get by with this. It's not going to be super nice. It's probably going to fail earlier. It's probably going to inject some noise into your laptop and into the mains, but it does kind of suffice, and it's not like a horrible mess. There is no loose solder balls. There is sufficient primary secondary clearance, although I'm not quite sure of the clearances on the primary side. I mean, look at this nice little isolation slots at the bridge rectifier. So this is one of those things I can't really give you a scare story like, oh, it's gonna explode on you if you use the cheap one. No, it's not. It is definitely worse. If you'd have the choice and if you're not super poor, I would obviously go for the genuine one or a second-hand genuine one. But this one is kind of okay-ish, I guess. Although I do have to say, it was 25 euros.
Something like that, yeah.
That's kind of expensive for such a shitty power supply. It's a very simple power supply. I would expect these to be cheaper.
It got delivered next day.
Yeah,
Helps.
I guess. It's I would have expected cheaper. One thing I do have to say, it does have a CE mark. This would never pass CE certifications. Yeah, so it has a CE mark. The company that you bought this from shouldn't sell this as CE certified because it's not. It is. It will fail all kinds of things. It will fail EMI, as I said. It will fail high voltage, high potential testing. So that's bullshit. But I guess it's okay. This one's great though. So that's it for this video. Hope you enjoyed the comparison between a genuine Lenovo power supply and a not so super cheap but still kind of cheap knockoff. And see you next time.